Oh, jeez, it is.
Okay. Um, just letting everybody know that we are going to be having Mark Ewens as a guest. Hopefully he'll check in here with me very quickly and we'll be able to get on with our show. We'll see what's going on here. If not, we'll take a pause and see what the deal is. But
Don't I look kind of like a fly on the wall
well,
back
move
here?
over.
I will, but just a thinking, man,
Okay.
kind of a creepy old
Yeah,
man.
you're the creepy guy in the background.
Yeah.
Get over here.
You don't want to be that close, baby. You know what I do to you, baby, when you get.
Oh, come on. Would you stop it? Stop it. Just stop. Just stop.
Oh,
This is
now I'm
this
creeping
is
my
what I
way
have
out.
to live with.
Now
This is what I have to live
I'm
with.
creeping my wife out.
Yeah, this
Eh,
is what I have to live with. Well, we're waiting on Mark to check in here with us, and we're hoping to be able to discuss a variety of topics today around the weather system because Mark is a meteorologist and has spent a lot of time talking about the weather. And that's as long as we've got some time and we're waiting on Mark here. I am just thinking that I'm going to contact him real quick here and see if he's doing all right.
Well,
But
I'll be the entertainment.
oh no, 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 no,
We're
no.
not that
We're
desperate.
not that desperate.
All right. Actually, I tell you
Well,
what.
what I was going to say is, why don't we talk a little bit while we're waiting for Mark
Well, I tell you what.
about the Armageddon snowstorm that we were supposed to get that didn't appear.
Well, no, we don't know how bad it is, how little is it in Fargo, but it was supposed to be up here for 6, 7 inches, and we got a little bit of dusting. But
Well, they
it's
said,
always interesting. Do they exaggerate it? And that's the thing. Do they have to exaggerate it because they don't want people to get out there stranded? Because uh, people aren't brilliant. There's lots of idiots out there, and they cause trouble. And maybe they're just trying to sit there. I mean, I'm trying to play uh, devil's advocate against you. You know, like you think they're being dumbasses. I'm thinking they're just worried about dumbasses. So it's one or the other,
well,
or a combination of both.
there's a lot of stuff that's been bothering me, and the fact that they can't predict a blizzard, but they're going to tell us what's going to happen to our sea levels and everything else here within the next decade.
Oh yeah, I mean, remember Al Gore's predictions, and
None of
they,
them have come true.
of
Not
course,
one.
because they were all supposed to be like 10, 10, 15 years ago, and of course now what's the dummies from New Jersey? What's her name again? The congresswoman.
I have no idea what
Oh,
you're talking
you
about.
know the young one. What's that? Yeah,
Oh,
idiot.
AOC.
AOC.
Okay.
Oh, good. How could you forget that? I mean, talk about getting old and not giving a shit about people like that. But AOC was good. She was predicting things that were going to end here pretty soon too. I mean, they really have to try to blow these things up.
Well, I'm just getting very, very tired. I even have said to you before that I'm just messaging Mark right now here. I've even said to you before that my worry is the fact that we're regressing rather than progressing. How soon before what we're going to be doing is throwing a virgin into a volcano? Because it'll say, yeah, we all laugh, but if you think about it, some of these green idiots are just about right there.
Well, the only problem we have is finding a virgin that's older than 12. All right, that's snotty.
That is pretty snotty.
There's a lots of good people still out there, but let's admit it. We are not being a prim and proper people anymore.
Well,
And
the problem that I have is the fact that there is so much, and I hate to use this word, but I'm going to because I like to throw it back at them. There's so much misinformation, and Mark's having trouble signing in. That's okay. If I have to, what I'm going to do is I will pause and I will try to. Okay, hang on. He says he's got no link, so let me
Oh,
hang on. I sent it.
hmm. And
Sent it to
I
your email. Tap
am.
dance, honey.
I just gotta sit there and say, like I told a couple of the wrestlers the other day, I just want to go back to the rotary phone.
Well,
I think, yeah, but you know, progress is interesting. But yeah, we're well, yeah, actually, we're kind of old timer folks, and that's cool to see.
here's the thing that I want everybody to understand. You talk to kids a lot about this, and what I want people to understand is it doesn't much matter what us old folks feel, because if we don't convince the kids, we're going down anyway.
Yeah,
And so that's part of the problem that I have with a lot of this, is the fact that, oh, there it is. There we go.
the storm.
There I oh, he's connecting. We got audio coming up.
We don't sound like a bunch
I
of idiots today.
I've got the top of your head, baby.
Yes, out there,
Well,
Ryan.
uh,
Okay.
uh,
Don't worry.
I had this set up for something else. Wait a
We
minute.
are
Hang on a second.
tap dance. I have my buddy, my other buddy here. We tap danced for you
No,
because
I never saw the link at the Mr. Weather
that's
out.
okay. We got you. We
Yeah,
got you.
well,
We
you
were
know
just
why? Because it
we
went to junk, and I always forget to look in my junk email.
Oh,
never forget your junk, honey.
Yeah.
Ryan, Ryan, don't do this. Come on, come on. This
This is a family show.
It's kind of no, this is not professional. Don't use professional to me in the same.
yeah.
That I've always claimed, at least let's have some fun. And I was not disparaging you, but I was making the comment that they're using the weather in many ways as fear mongering. For example, I appreciate the warning of all the snow
Right.
and everything else, but basically we got 2 inches, and a lot of it's melted already, and every time we get a storm now, we name them. People sit and huddle in their basements, and there's two problems with this in my estimation. You get people like me who the next time you give one's gonna go, didn't happen last time, so I'm gonna go get my bun stuck out there. Okay. Or you're gonna get the people that'll never come out of their basement. But in the meantime, we've got, not you because you're my baby, but we've got people that say, I'm a weatherman, and we're all going to die in a decade because the oceans are going to overflow. I mean, can we get some semblance of order here, Mark? Can we?
No,
Okay, how come?
no. This is it. This is it. Can you hear me fine, by the way? Because I've actually got the old studio mic set up, so theoretically I should be nice and clear.
You are.
Okay.
But
Okay.
why can't we seem to get a handle on this, where if I choose to disbelieve, I'm allowed to go with God, rather than have these other people, bless their hearts, who are running around panicking, rule what I would like to do with my life. Just asking for a friend.
Well, it's all about control. Obviously, that's the primary thing, is that if they can get us, as a friend of mine down here often refers to the 15-minute cities, if they can get us all to be in relatively confined spaces and limited resources, then it's easier to control that than a free people. And one way of doing it, obviously, is using Mother Nature's typical natural variability as a weapon. Look, look at how bad it has become. And of course, the science being so bastardized over the years, whether it's COVID or whether it's climate change or whatever the case may be. Yeah, humans have an influence, but typically because we do stupid things like we build along a river. Then when the river floods, we wonder why we have our rebuild our houses, or we live along the Gulf Coast or along the coast where hurricanes come ashore on a regular basis. And when we get flooded or knocked down by a hurricane, it's got to be climate change. No, because we put ourselves in harm's way on a regular basis, and we're shocked when that happens.
Well, let's talk about stupid things for a minute and people doing stupid things because I sent you a couple of things on cloud seeding
Yes.
and talk about stupid things because the more that I looked into cloud seeding, and people have been talking about us tin hatters because of the contrails in
Hmm.
the sky for years, telling us that we're idiots. And then in fact, I'll put the link to the video that's promoting this out of Colorado in the comments section when we end here. But it's about a 7-minute long video telling everybody about joy, joy, happy, happy. We're seeding clouds. And which is interesting because they used to tell us they weren't doing that. Remember that?
Hmm.
We're not doing that. That's why we were tin hatters. Then they said, yeah, we're doing it, but it's not working. And now they're telling us how great it is. So, what's your feeling about us messing around to that degree with the weather?
It's the old physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So anytime you put something into the atmosphere, it's going to respond, period. Contrails, I want to address that very quickly because it stands for condensation trails, and condensation occurs when you put the most potent greenhouse gas into the atmosphere, and that's water vapor, which we don't want to talk about. But when you dig through the literature, you come to recognize that the impact of contrails, at least from the official scientific standpoint, is not at all understood. They have no concept as to what it actually does. When you look at it from the standpoint of higher level reflectivity, you're going to actually be dimming sunlight because you'll be reflecting more radiation out into space. So, in theory, over the long term, you'll be cooling the stratosphere while you're warming the troposphere. So, you'll get an increase in storms. Oh, wait, that's happening. So, you start to see the effects that are occurring naturally because of extra moisture in the atmosphere. The real fuel, and I've said this time and time again, is water vapor, not carbon dioxide. And we don't hear them talking about methane. I have to use the proper British pronunciation, but they're never talking about methane, which is many times more potent than carbon dioxide. They don't talk about water vapor. They don't talk about methane. They don't talk about argon. They don't talk about many of the other gases that have an impact. Carbon dioxide. Why?
Hmm.
Oh, wait, because it's the one thing we can control. No, we cannot. We absolutely cannot control it. We can look at history and see the natural cycles. That's why there's forests that are being uncovered in northern Canada, because as the globe does warm, which has happened before, you're going to have changes in the climate that have happened before. But since we weren't here to see them, yeah.
Can we get impacts that are more widespread? For example, let's look at the North Carolina storm that just suddenly
Sure.
stopped and it wouldn't stop raining. Now,
Hmm.
whether North Carolina seeded or not, there's 8 states that are currently seeding clouds to overcome mega drought. Could their seeding have impacted what actually occurred in North Carolina, even though they may not have done anything themselves?
It's perhaps as likely that the cloud seeding they did in Colorado or North Dakota would have had an impact on the weather there, because what happens where you seed the clouds here, it moves. It doesn't occur where you drop the silver iodide or whatever the particulate that you're using to seed clouds. It doesn't stay there. It flows with the atmosphere, which is a continuum. And so what happens here occurs downstream. That was the original premise, though, of cloud seeding, was that if you seed clouds in eastern Montana, they'll produce more rain and less hail in western North Dakota. They understood when they started doing the project in the 70s, well, before then, the 50s, but when they were doing cloud seeding in North Dakota in the 70s, starting back then, they understood it was a downstream thing. You don't seed in North Dakota, you seed in Montana. Again, it's a continuum. What happens here goes somewhere else and continues on.
So a lot of this could actually be man-made change, but it's not your car. It's not
And
car
to be
parts.
No, but I mean, again, to be perfectly clear, carbon
Yeah.
dioxide is a greenhouse gas, but it is not the most potent one. And the levels have essentially flatlined. Oh, wait, the United States has actually reduced its carbon footprint.
Yes.
Don't tell anybody. We don't want them to know that since 2000, we've been cutting back on the amount of carbon dioxide we're putting in the atmosphere. But I refer frequently to that volcano in 2022 that put all that water vapor in the atmosphere. And when was Helene? Hmm. Let's see. I don't know.
Hmm.
Sometime thereafter. All that extra water vapor is massive fuel in the atmosphere. Oh, and by the way, Bruce will love this. We're already dead because we basically have exceeded the IPCC's, end of life threshold because of the volcano jumping the temperature above the 1.5 threshold.
We are in trouble.
Well, we're not supposed to live past 50 if you talk to the UN. So
Yeah, well,
I found out something really interesting because I don't know how they would figure this, but this is from the CO2 Coalition. And they say that our current levels of CO2 are actually near record lows. They went all the way back millions of years to Precambrian, Cambrian, Carboniferous, Triassic, Jurassic. And when they charted everything, they said that what we actually are today is CO2 impoverished. Is
hmm,
that probably more of an issue than too much CO2 because of plants and things? And don't plants contribute to weather?
they do. The other thing that we don't necessarily talk about because of the carbon sequestration, because I hate to use the fancy terms, the carbon capture by the plants and
Yeah.
all that biomass that eventually rots and puts it back into the atmosphere is something we really don't talk about often enough. So, as far as the record, I haven't seen the study, so I'll be a little slow
That's okay.
yeah.
It was just something that I ran across, and I'm sitting here going, hmm, because they just came out with this new thing where they're cutting down trees in rainforests and other places, and
Mhm.
rather than using them for lumber, they're burying them because they say that that's going to contribute less CO2. And
I think
that's
I've
the plan.
I think I've talked about this before as well, that all the hydroelectric dams that they discovered that as they flood larger areas and all the biomass decays, it re-releases the carbon back into the atmosphere. So all that work that was done to produce green energy kind of backfired on them. So same basic principle you're talking about.
I used to tell my students for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction that is usually not anticipated by the government. Um, and that is what I believe in many ways is what we're experiencing is we're going through all this knee-jerk reaction so people can make some coin, people can have
Hmm.
more power and control. And I have a feeling that we're just starting to see some of what we may be reaping from what is being sowed. And it's got me a little bit concerned because there was a time when the green thing was just kind of a chuckle
Hmm.
because it was so ridiculous. It's not ridiculous anymore because the impacts are the negative impacts especially are becoming very, very apparent.
So what do they do? Well, first off, you're called a climate denier because obviously if you bring these points up, you immediately need to be discredited. So once again, for the record, climate change is real. It's a naturally occurring thing. Human beings are like we're tickling the leg of the dog. It's going to wake up and move around, and that's going to happen. But as far as humans having the impact that they're trying to push upon us, it's very dubious. And when you see scientists who used to be as a part of the green agenda take a step back and go, wait a minute, what about ABC? They're immediately castigated and kicked out of the club. And there have
Mhm.
been some pretty high level scientists that were very well regarded by the climate boys, some of them women, who are kicked out of the club by simply saying, hold on a moment, what about ABC? Well, no, if you don't toe the line. So the intolerance that is shown by somebody to not follow their version of the science right there is a red flag that everything you're saying is accurate.
I've seen it in even some of the local weather people, not you, but some of the local weather people even come out and have said they're reluctant to say anything because they could lose their job.
Yeah. Yeah, there is that. So there is that type of political pressure that is put on people to toe the line or you will be kicked out of the club. And some scientists have said, well, so be it. I'll be kicked out of the club because I have to maintain my scientific integrity. I don't know. I still tell people, don't trust me. Go find a physics book and look up the fancy word emissivity, and you'll find the different graphs that, for as long as I've known physics, will show you how the different constituents of the atmosphere re-radiate infrared back into the atmosphere, which is what the CO2 argument is all about. And you'll find there are other gases that are more powerful. But we don't talk about those because we can't control them. And the one we think we can control, CO2, is equally uncontrollable.
Well, this is called from a magazine called The Beauty of the Planet. And it says scientists just confirmed that the Earth is slowly tilting towards its next ice age. Everybody be calm. It's going to be 11,000 years.
Yeah.
But they've long suspected that changes in the Earth's orbit play a key role in triggering ice ages. It's
Mhm.
researchers from Cardiff University, and they've uncovered a precise link between the orbital cycles and glacial periods, which means nobody's influencing it.
No, no. You talk about the Milankovitch cycles, and I was actually a part of a NOAA group back when I worked for the Weather Service. That was I did a conference in California in 2000 when they introduced the newly minted unified global climate database that all researchers would have. Now, on the outset, that makes sense. If we're all looking at the same data, we have a base point to start from. You don't realize, though, that that base data then is what is manipulated to show certain things in or out of climate. At the conference that I was at Berkeley, no surprise, but the conference at Berkeley, the keynote speaker was an astrophysicist, no dummy by any stretch of the
Right.
imagination. And his commentary, his presentation was on Milankovitch cycles as being the driver of climate change. His talk was about as welcome as a fart at a wedding. Yeah, I'll tell you what, the meteorologists all politely applauded at the end of it, but you could tell who the ones who were like, yeah, finally somebody speaking the truth, and the majority were like, because he had just blown a lot of their theories. 2000 was a turning point in many ways for this whole climate discussion, kind of when Al Gore really got his start,
Yep.
and the whole panic about carbon dioxide as being the worst greenhouse gas has taken off with a willing media.
Of course, and what does a willing media mean? It means that shall we say, the elites who actually can make money off the carbon dioxide, and that, let's admit it. I mean, we all, anybody that realizes what's happening here, it has nothing to do with the uh, cooling or the heating of the earth. It all has to do with making money and getting oil out of the ground, especially for North Dakota. I
Yeah.
mean, look, I hate to sit there and listen to these people lie about this stuff day after day, but that is the total thing. I mean, I got to ask you some questions about CO2.
Sure.
Okay, one of the legislatures says that if you pump it in the ground long enough, it turns into a solid. Now, obviously, a gas cannot turn into a solid unless it's like 84 million degrees below zero. I mean, right? Am I
Yeah.
wrong, or is that
No, no, you're right. I forget off the top of my head the freezing point of CO2, but it's perilously close to
absolute zero?
not absolute zero, but it's down there.
It's
Yeah.
down there. Yes, I know, and that's what I just have to chuckle about it too. And of course, obviously, at first they're going to sit there and they're worried about the pipelines because lots of people are worried about the pipelines exploding, and I personally am not hugely worried about the pipelines exploding, but I do not like the idea that we're paying for the let's say uh, the CO2 being deported or being sent out to the oil fields so they can get oil extract more oil. It's what's going to
Hmm.
what we're doing. What we're really doing, and especially in North Dakota. I
Well,
mean,
they can do whatever they want, but they need to do it legally without eminent domain and everything else.
Right.
And they need to stop lying. Now, I know you're not concerned about them exploding, but
oh, I am, but I
well,
don't think there's that.
the guy that was there was a well, of course he was in the energy business, and he said there's absolutely no danger at all of one of these pipelines exploding. What do you think about that? I'm serious. I mean,
What happened?
he said absolutely no danger.
That's well, in what little I have read, that's a lie.
Yes.
And if nothing else, it's dangerously silly to to ever use the word never in anything.
That's the first thing I thought was, wow, I want that guarantee written down, especially if there's a pipeline anywhere near my land,
Hmm.
my house, because you said never. Of course, you have to be alive to claim that, which is probably the thing that they're looking at right now. But when I look at this, I see recently, happily, because we all know South Dakota took some huge steps to banning use of eminent domain, but
Hmm.
we're also seeing recently Iowa, Louisiana, and Florida have jumped on board. And I've also got a short video that I'll post, which is with Governor DeSantis, who literally is calling people out. Because what's happened is
You want to play that?
no,
Okay.
no. What's happened is the Republicans have hijacked the green agenda because they're making money off it now.
Right,
Well,
right.
DeSantis is what's really cool is DeSantis is saying the exact opposite of what we have our governor saying. Okay, because like Armstrong's sitting there saying, "Oh yeah, this is we have to pump it out here for a purpose, and we got to save the planet with this." And DeSantis is saying, "No, you don't pump CO2 into our ground." And it's kind of amazing because uh, I always hear on 1100, my favorite Scooty Hendon. Uh, he tells us that we have this unique geological formations in North Dakota where we can hold and store this CO2, right? And it's kind of funny because Florida seems to have it, so does Georgia, and they all have these little unique geological formations. Do you think that they're blowing smoke up our butts?
About the fact that we've got perfect capture places.
And yeah, us in Florida now.
Well, yeah, Florida, nothing problems with swamps or anything like that.
Well, that's what
Um,
I thought.
But they want to do it down there too. They think it's a good idea.
no.
Or some legislatures.
Yeah, the one thing I haven't done, although I imagine the numbers got to be pretty fantastic. Oh, by the way, I must correct myself. It's only minus 110
Oh,
Fahrenheit is the freezing point of carbon dioxide. So it's actually pretty warm relative to absolute zero, but I digress.
okay.
The amount of carbon dioxide that you would have to sequester from the atmosphere in order to actually affect global climate change, we can't do it. We
Ah,
simply cannot do it.
So we're being lied to almost every step of the way. At the same time, we're being told to sign the check. And nobody's mentioning, as you said, China, India,
Hmm.
and many other places who are building coal plants
Yeah.
like there's no tomorrow while we're busy shutting them down. Now, I know Trump is saying we're going to open them up and stuff again, but in the meantime, we have to pay for that again too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been preaching the small nuclear reactors, those small modular reactors, the SMRs that they're trying out in a couple of different countries overseas, and they're having great result with them. You really want to have an alternative power. It's not wind, it's not solar, it's nuclear power. That's going to be the future. But we don't want to talk about that because of all the scaredy cats from the 50s. So, but
mhm.
but to the point that we're making here,
Yeah.
we can't. Even if the United States went to zero emissions tomorrow, with the rest of the world still putting as much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere as they're doing, nothing changes.
But do we really? None of us really give a dang if there's lots of CO2 because we all know it's good for plants and it's like going how much how much bull are they expecting us to believe? I mean, it's like uh, I always say, yeah, we are that stupid.
Well,
Well, I get.
you mentioned NOAA, and there's the Weather Modification Act of 1976, because I'm the fact lady. And I found it interesting that NOAA does not research or conduct weather modification experiments, and it says has no plans to do so in the future. But you have to report at least 10 days prior to undertaking any weather modification activity to NOAA. Otherwise, there's up to a $10,000 fine. But we talked about the contrails and stuff, and that's listed. That's listed as number one, seeding or dispersing any substance, followed by number two, using fires or heat sources to influence convective circulation or to evaporate fog. Three, modifying the solar radiation exchange of the earth or clouds through the release of gas, dust, liquids, or aerosols.
Mhm.
Modifying the characteristics of land or water surfaces by dusting with treating with powders, liquid dyes, or sprays. My other personal favorite, releasing electrically charged or radioactive particles into the atmosphere. Um, those eventually come down, don't they?
At some point, they may have a very slow precipitation rate, but they do come down. All of that has to do, well, the atmosphere is very electric, and you never hear scientists talking about the electrosphere, the electricity, the global electric circuit, and the many things that that does to the weather and climate. There's a whole suite of research on the physics side of the house that rarely sees the light of day that has tied the global electric circuit events well outside of the Earth's atmosphere, solar, other planets that contribute to changes in the electrosphere that change the climate. It's been well documented for a very long period of time. You never hear about it. When I talk about it, people kind of they give you the same look that the dog does waiting for dinner. It's just, what are you talking about? So there are so many things that are contributors to climate change that we don't the contrail thing, yeah, it's there. Everything we do has a feedback, but which is the dominant? What if it's coming from space? Something we have zero control over. We're just spitting
Yes,
in the wind and using it to beat people over the head tax wise.
the earth is going to tilt.
Yes.
It's going to
Yeah,
tilt.
Milankovitch cycles. I mean, it was the accepted way of climate change until somebody said, "Hey, we can make money off this stuff."
Mhm.
The thing that bothers me is number six is applying shock waves, sonic energy sources, or other explosive or acoustic sources in the atmosphere. Um, that can't be good, Mark.
No, no. Once again, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The challenge is we have no idea what those are. So we're doing weather modification, which in its base idea has noble merit, but we really don't look farther downstream. Once that thunderstorm that would have developed here doesn't develop, it develops somewhere else. How does that ripple? It's the old throwing several stones into a pond at once. Which ones are going to be dominant? Which ones are going to survive? Which ones are going to dissipate? How are they going to interact? It is random. It's truly random.
So this is one of my favorites, and he doesn't believe it, but the number seven on this list is use aircraft propeller downwash, wash, or other sources of artificial wind generation. Right down the road here by Langdon, we've
Mhm.
got a big ass turbine farm.
Yeah, yeah.
Would that not be doing some of this?
Once again, everything that happens in the atmosphere has a downstream impact, whether it's direct or whether it's multiplied or dissipated, but it alters something. And all the wind farms that have gone up across the country, what impacts have they had? How have they perturbated weather? Uh, Another study that was done back in the late 70s, Chagnon, who was the state climatologist for Illinois, I do believe, did a study on the low hills of southern Illinois enhancing thunderstorm development. And we're talking not much different terrain changes than the Red River Valley. At that time, they laughed at this man for the small scale changes in topography having an
Mhm.
impact on the weather and climate. Well, you jump forward 40 years, and research done here in the good old Red River Valley showed essentially the same thing, multiplied many times globally. It's like, oh, yeah. Small scale changes near the surface have an impact farther along down the way. Turbines churning up the atmosphere? Probably.
How
It's the
small
continuity of
scale?
physics.
How small scale? I mean, could it? Okay, so people again are going to go, you're crazy. But for
But
example,
yeah, your
we
point.
have been changing the topography quite a bit around here, especially by putting in the drain tile.
Yeah.
All right. Thus causing those fields that used to hold the water to push the water down. Um, and they no longer what Mother Nature used to do, she can't do anymore because once
Right.
again we've screwed up. Besides the flooding aspect, could the fact that that water is no longer being ponded and everything else, and the fact that they're grading the land so that it causes this drainage and everything else, could that also impact even just that small bit? I don't know because it's happening all across the Red River Valley. It's not just one guy. You go up and down the Red River Valley and find me a place that's not drain tiled anymore.
The one thing too, not to dismiss the
No, I
discussion on drain
don't know.
tile at all, because it comes back to the action equal opposite reaction. What we don't hear much discussed about is the compaction, the subsoil compaction layer that has occurred with the increasing amount and size of farm equipment over the years, particularly in the Red River Valley where the clay base is the deepest. Over time, we have essentially developed a compaction layer that's subsurface. So water, even before the drain tiling thing, water was not transferred naturally down in one place. This subsoil compaction layer started doing transverse flows in ways that weren't occurring naturally. But we can't talk about the compaction layer because of the increased amount and size of farm equipment over the years. Because then, well, we're blaming the farmers. No, we're not blaming the farmers. We're stating a simple fact. It's an unintended consequence of what has happened as a part of modernization. Now, the drain tile, the same thing. I mean, that's another question that you got to be careful who you ask.
Yeah, I mean, and I know there are people that are going to throw stones at me, but my job is to ask questions. And when you
Right.
that soil compaction, would that also hinder the ability of the soil to be able to hang on to the moisture when it rains and stuff and have more runoff?
Well, you would have a more shallow layer that can evaporate out. So the theory goes that you can be more susceptible to drought because instead of having a deeper layer,
Yep.
you've shrunk the size of the layer that can hold the moisture so you can evaporate that layer out more readily. So you end up having more drought frequency because instead of having a deeper layer to dry out, it dries out more quickly. And it's not just the short-term drought that we get pretty much naturally, but the longer-term droughts.
See, that's the thing. I mean, I'm older than literally than dirt, as long as we're talking about dirt. And as you age, you have that ability to look back and go, well, that was stupid. Why did we do that? That was
I've,
stupid.
I've never done that.
No, I mean, and so young people today don't have that. I like to call it, gosh, gosh darn it, shouldn't have done that period of their lives.
Hmm.
And and when you try to talk to them about a lot of this, they just, you know, ask you to tip your tinfoil hat to a jaunty angle. And my favorite phrase is, "Oh, you boomer." But
Okay.
this
Okay.
this
I'm a boomer. Next question.
yeah, this stuff is real. I mean, when you sit there and watch it happening, and they're it can't just be cow farts because we've had cows for a long, long time.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Precisely.
I'm left going, what the heck?
I tell you what, one thing they're having a hard time dealing with is if people do something that they don't try to do anymore in school and anywhere is educating the people on history and
Hmm.
even simple things of what happened and when a hurricane did something and when this did something. It's just like they want to make it sound like the last one was the worst thing that ever happened. But if you
Sure.
look at the history of things, for instance, the biggest tornado ever in probably the world, and especially in the United States, was in the 30s, I believe, and the tornado killed in those days through running through Illinois, Indiana, and all
Oh
those
yeah, yeah,
states.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
killed over 1,000 people,
Mhm.
and that was incredible. And so it's like going. You have to know that this crap's been happening for a while, and this tornado at certain times was over a mile long, mile wide. It was incredible. And did you? And we have never heard of anything like that before. But why? Because they don't want anybody to know that stuff like that has happened before. And I mean, there is all. It's just like they want. Well, like we talked before, they want to scare everybody.
You
Mark,
know,
I got, go
Bruce
ahead.
brings up an important point because you'll see these increased numbers of tornadoes that have occurred across the country.
Yeah.
Part of that, and I say a large part of it personally, I believe, is because the detection ability has gone up. Also, the Weather Service has really, in the last 30 years, pushed the effort to get out to do more storm damage surveys and to be far more meticulous in researching where these tornadoes have occurred. So there has been a great increase in the detective ability in real time by the Doppler radars, but also because the detection network of spotters and other entities who have been trained to see tornadoes has increased dramatically. So we're getting more reports, not necessarily because there's more tornadoes, but more are being observed, more are being reported.
Or people too to see them.
And,
Yes,
and more weather channel reporters that need to make a salary and be on the ground going, oh, look at the yeah, look at the
I
damage.
see things.
Yes.
So I have a silly question to ask you.
Yeah.
The dirty 30s with the Dust Bowl and everything else. If we're causing so much damage now, why did that happen then? I mean, I know the history behind it, kind of with the farming and stuff, but
Hmm.
they're attributing everything that's happening today to climate. So cow farts and cars weren't the problem back then. So what's the deal?
Well, I mean, and yeah, part of it, the agriculture thing, that's classic government stupid because as the farmers were moving westward in the plains, they said, hey, let's tear up all this natural grass and plant wheat
Hmm.
because, we need to feed more people. And in the natural ebb and tide of precipitation cycles, they were coming out of a prolonged wet period through the 1860s into the 1920s. So when people were farming the high plains of, well, all down the front range of the Rockies, down into northern Mexico, when they were farming all that land, there was plentiful moisture for wheat. Then the weather does what climate does. It flipped into drought mode. Now, all of a sudden, all that soil that naturally would have held the moisture is gone. And boom, the drought became so phenomenally worse because of humans doing stupid things to the soil. Not carbon dioxide, nothing else, but we changed the face of the earth.
It's not nice to fool with Mother Nature.
No, you F with Mother Nature, she's going to step on your toes. So,
So what can we do um to I know education's gone because
Hmm.
that's insane. But what can we do to get people to at least consider the fact that sometimes it's just the weather, people? You
you
do a
can't.
great job of it, but
Well, you really can't because you've got lone voices like myself or yours that are saying these things amongst a very well-oiled, well-financed
yeah,
broadcast entity that has the airwaves. And those of us who try to speak a little more common sense into it, yeah, we're ignored because we're crackpots or we're just, we're climate deniers. They use instead of sitting down and saying, well, let's have a discussion. What actually are your points of view and what's the science behind it? No, you're just dismissed. And of course, human nature is we want to be a part of the crowd. People hate being fringe because, well, there's something wrong with fringe people.
so you like nuclear. Tell me why.
Oh, I love nuclear
Yeah.
because nuclear is truly clean. Well, what about Fukushima? What about Three Mile Island? Okay, with the number of nuclear plants that have been in operation globally, you can point to four really three, because 3 Mile Island is kind of questionable, but you can point to three or four well-defined accidents that were
Chernobyl.
probably as much human stupidity and mismanagement as well as, okay, we put a nuclear reactor on a fault line. I mean, yeah, okay, it wasn't the brightest thing. The
Mhm.
Japanese, bless their hearts, they didn't understand some of the tectonic theory behind it. But anyway, nuclear is clean, it's renewable. It and with the changes in technology for these small modular reactors, that one of the biggest companies behind it is Rolls-Royce. Yes, the people that make automobiles. Rolls-Royce has been developing SMRs and they're using them in Europe in places, and they love them because, small amounts of fuel compared to the older reactors.
Well,
Yep.
They're great.
Chernobyl was completely human error.
Was that Ukraine?
No, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Chernobyl was pure stupidity. That was
yeah,
just,
Yep.
in
Yep.
3 Mile Island, that was
yep.
that was another combination of overreaction and probably just somebody being really tired and misreading the instructions. And of course, Fukushima, that
Wrong,
Fault line.
wrong spot.
wrong spot, wrong time, wrong volcano.
No, you're talking about the smaller nuclear reactors. I take it they're going to take a lot less fuel.
Yep.
How well? I mean, okay, how much do they generate? How much uh
Watts.
voltage, whatever you are they
One
like?
one one M one SMR could run a city the size of Grand Forks, I'm told.
Is that right?
So we wouldn't be using all this land for the wind towers, for the solar panels and everything else. We would actually be able to utilize our land for something productive.
Yeah, like farming or
Yeah,
other things.
what a
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, Bitcoin, I don't care.
Don't
well,
go there. Gee,
I know. I had to say it. I had to say it, Bruce. Sorry.
do you think nuclear is so resistant because it, quite frankly, isn't a moneymaker?
It's not a moneymaker. Let's be perfectly honest. I hate to use the term, but it really does threaten big oil.
Yep.
yes, it does. And big
It
oil,
really does. It
it's
it
big oil's
threatens
a
it.
problem
it
right now. They own the state. Now, do they own the country? Pretty close. I
yeah.
mean, obviously, it's almost scary listening to people talk about and the love that North Dakota is supposed to have for big oil. I mean, they sit there and they tell us that they get their 2% taxes that they have to pay for half of our roads and half of our schools and stuff like that. It's like going, guys, these corporations, they compensate, they elevate the cost of what you're paying for gasoline so they don't have to pay their 2% taxes. You're paying for their 2% taxes. People just don't seem to understand the simple things. These guys aren't wonderful people that run oil companies. They're people trying to make money and you're paying for it is one thing we have to try. I try to tell everybody, but who believes it?
Well,
Everybody's going to sit there and listen to 1100 about how wonderful oil companies are to us.
with everything, follow the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if you were in charge of the world?
Yeah,
Oh, boy, it would be. Oh.
Besides nuclear, what would you what would you be doing? What would you say we could do to get out of this insanity? Because we're in a loop.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're in a loop.
Well, this actually is where the free market does come into play, because when you really do put the free market into action and allow them to freely, without government constraints, find the better mousetrap, whoever gets the better mousetrap first is going to end up being the king maker of the money and will become the dominant driving force in it. And then, depending on how altruistic they wish to be, they can share the technology with somebody else who can then replicate it and move forward with it. So the free market is really the way to, but I mean a free market
yeah,
without government overregulation. You do have to have, it's the fine line. You got to have a little regulation because sometimes greed, does lead into avarice.
Yeah,
But
but we're looking at crony capitalism, which
right, right.
agrees with government.
Totally different. Yeah, totally
Yeah.
different animal. Totally different animal. That needs to be shot down. Crony capitalism is what has given capitalism a bad word.
that is North Dakota way. I mean,
Well,
seriously.
it's a lot of states. Louisiana is
Yeah.
another,
I,
Republican
I
state
Oh,
know.
that's,
trust me. Yeah.
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 But we're supposed to be such a wonderful little state here that I have to sit there and knock the people down that believe that we're so wonderful and everybody loves each other in North Dakota.
North Dakota nice, baby. North
Yes,
Dakota
North
nice.
Dakota nice, and it's like, no, no, no. There's capital cronyism is alive and well in Bismarck.
Do you have any other questions for Mark?
Yeah,
I
can you,
I just
yeah,
I just
Homer.
gotta add one thing. I gotta still see. We're gonna go for history.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh, history for 500, Alex.
right. History for $500. All right. It's
How about for 50
it's
cents and a good wink?
CO2. We're going to get back to one more thing about CO2.
Sure,
Really
sure.
bugs the hell out of me. And the oil, 10 years ago, or actually, but maybe 20 years ago, they're talking about the Bakken, actually about 10, they're talking about how well the Bakken is and how big it is and stuff like that. And they talked about having oil supply for like 80 to 200 years. And of course, now, since they try to get the CO2 out there, they're talking about, oh, it's going to end in like 8, 10 years. We're going to start slowing down. We're not going to have any money anymore in North Dakota because we haven't.
We're going to run out of oil.
Yeah, we don't. We need the CO2 to pump in, so it is to pressurize the oil and stuff like that. Did like all I gotta say is that what
Does that work? Well, are they blowing sunshine
who's
again?
telling the truth? Who's telling the truth? Was it these people overestimated the amount of oil, or are they trying to bullshit us now, or a combination?
It's probably a combination, but I would imagine a lot of it comes down to technology as well. You can only drill so far into the earth. You
Right.
can, we think about that. The earth is big, really, really big. And we're scratching down how far? How many miles? I mean, we're not, we haven't gotten anywhere near going through the crust, much less actually getting down to what might be below it. And I think a lot of it comes to we simply don't know. And a scientist, some researcher, somebody came up and said, "We got 300 years worth of oil down there." And then that number just stuck. It was a puma. It was a pull out of my ass. That's all that it was. And that number, how do you verify it? Now, the CO2 thing, as far as pumping CO2 down into kind of pressurize and maybe get that oil to bubble back up, that's another one of those. It's like, really?
They I
Because how are you going to know where that gas goes? You might be putting it in the ground. Is it going to go east, west? Is it going to go laterally? I mean, you don't know the fractures. You don't understand or know the topology of the earth well enough to know where that gas is going to go.
But we're going to be paying for it anyway.
Yeah.
They're pumping out there. It's kind of interesting that Harold Hamm and Armstrong aren't paying for the stuff that's going to help them. It's frustrating for me to
One
see that.
one more question
Yeah.
before I go. Silver iodide
Yep.
in itself in small amounts isn't technically toxic, but for the amount that they're going over and over and over and dropping and dropping and dropping quantities. And it's amazing. Nobody wants to talk about that either. That stuff hitting the ground and staying in the ground because it doesn't just disperse into the atmosphere, I believe. We're correct?
You're right. You remember the old term, dilution is the solution to
Right,
pollution.
right.
How'd that work out for us?
Yeah, okay, because that's when I go out and research that, they keep talking about parts per and dilution and everything else, but they also then very quietly go, and of course we're not talking about the quantity that we're seeing in cloud seeding, but never mind that. Just move along, move along. And when I look at that, that stuff can't be good if it causes that chemical reaction in our atmosphere. What would it do in the ground and in our water?
Boy, this is where I wish I'd paid attention in soil science class 30 years ago.
I don't. This is a test. I don't expect to get it right first time, but I just didn't know if you knew anything about that because um it just seems to me that there's more and more of it that's being done, and it's got to go somewhere.
You've given me something to actually do a little digging into because every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So yes, the base laws of physics haven't changed. It goes somewhere. So unless the silver iodide somehow magically changes state and becomes, fairy dust, it's going to have a reaction at some point.
Well, that's what I thought too. And when I looked at it, and quite frankly, I'm putting up my disclaimer now, saying that
Yes.
here's responsible for anything that we said today. It's as is, as we figured it out, and that includes everybody here, including my dear friend Mark. So I want everybody to make sure they take a good gander at that there. But I go to you, sir, because you're my weather guru. You seem to you've been in the business a long time, and like me, you're very straight and very matter of fact,
You're a
and
wise
and I
man.
appreciate that. And is there anything else you have for the weather gods for us tonight?
Well, I'll use the platform just to say this. This is slightly off topic, but we're obviously in the next drought cycle.
Yes.
I've been telling a lot of folks across the region have been asking me, think 1984 to 92. That was kind of the last, of drought of significance. That's
Okay.
kind of where we are now. Are we in 1984, 1985? Are we at the front end of it? Or are we already? Because the thing with drought is you don't know that you're in drought until you're
Right.
in the drought. So it takes a time to recognize that you're actually in drought. So I suspect we're probably in that 84 to 92 time frame. We're probably 86, 87. We're in it a few years. We've got a ways to go to get out of it. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Uh, Part of it will be exacerbated by many of the things we've talked about
Talked
today,
about.
many of the things that we've done since the 40 years ago when we had the last big drought cycle come through. We've had smaller droughts, but I think this one's going to kind of, and I'm an ag guy. I like to eat and
Yeah.
I love our farmers, but this is probably going to kick a lot of agriculturalists' ass because we're on the north end of it. You look at the drought that's gone on through the a large parts of the wheat belt and the corn belt and other places. It's pretty serious already, and it's just, the beginning of April.
Well, and when you look at the amount of gallons per day cattle consume,
Yeah,
pigs consume,
yeah,
dairy cows, um, this is going to impact more than just your peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be difficult. Is there anything anyone can do besides be a be a little bit more judicious, maybe use rain barrels for watering the garden and learn
Mhm.
some of those other conservation techniques? I tell you one thing, when my pipes freeze and water doesn't come out of the tap, life gets real interesting.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that doesn't have to last real long before you are very appreciative of the way of life we have here.
You're talking about 8 years drought. The last one was 8 years.
Yeah, in broad terms, it was, yeah, because then after 92, 93 was kind of the transition. Then 94 was really the beginning of the wet cycle that
Yeah.
led to the 97 flood. We
Years.
not only made up and erased the drought, but we put so much excess water into the system. Of course, 97 was a whole other thing.
Mhm.
But like that before. And the weird thing is one of the snowiest winters on record was 1989. So smack dab in the middle of this drought, we had one of the snowiest winters on record. That's weather,
Mhm.
you know.
Okay.
I
No
think it was
matter
a
if they tell us they can track it.
no, it is random. It really
And
is. It's the old, I like, and of course, knowing my history, there is actually a random, Monte Carlo randomizers. There's also my favorite, the Drunkard's Walk randomizer. And that's where we are.
Ah,
well, darling, on that note, I want to thank you again
Well,
for
thank you.
helping me explain some things to a group of people, many of who are aware but don't always understand. And hopefully there's some people out there who now have some more information. I'll put some of those links in the comment,
Yeah.
and hopefully we'll be able to at least carry on wonderfully intelligent conversations when someone tells us we are wearing our tinfoil hats.
And when someone, if you've got a question, you know how to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer questions and try to illuminate and get some feedback. And as I say on this little radio thing I do
Yeah,
periodically, you know what?
say,
If you have a problem with what I've said, ask me. Let's have a conversation. Let's
you
stop throwing
tell
invectives
them
at
when
one
you
another.
tell them where to find you because
Yeah.
they can stream you even if they're out west. Because I have a lot of people that watch out west. You're from
Yeah.
3 to 6.
Yep. On 1310 AM, 1033, 107, KNOXradio.com.
You
So,
Monday
yeah.
through
So,
Friday, and your show is extremely entertaining, and I'm very appreciative because I don't always call, but I'm usually listening.
well, I mean, there's a show in the morning called Critical Thought. I think mine should be called Fuzzy Logic.
No offense to Noah, but I like your show much better.
We got a
Thank
good
you.
group.
Take care, Mark.
Take care,
We'll see y'all
everybody.
later.
Bye bye. God
Bye.
bless.
Dang.
See ya. Get out of there.